Correction to mother's funeral. So my mother has passed away from drinking and pilling. My father has hid this from the family. Her liver failed. I'm at my mother's funeral. I am mourning her in the appropriate way. I'm doing it exactly as my father. We're both mourning appropriately. I'm mourning my mother's death, but also that I wasn't able to get more of her honesty about what she was doing to me. And, I got so many teachers and people trying to help me while my mother did a bunch of stuff, and we need to get this straight, and now we'll never will. Instead, I get to die, suffer, and be in pain for the rest of my life. And that's all this what I don't understand, all this crap my mother created. So, yes, I'm very sad for my mother, for my health, for my future, for everything. My father has just crashed my Social Security. I just moved home to take care of her. My mother just drank in front of me with her last breaths, or the only time she was out of the hospital and she came home. She went right to the liquor cabinet, just too much. But then I have my nephew come up to me with his best friend, who is my mother's grandson, and ask me how I can be sad for my mother after what she did to me. How can you be crying and actually upset at your mother's funeral with all the stuff she did to you? Now, in one of my videos, I said my brother said the same thing, but that's wrong. My brother did agree with that. He was saying those things beforehand, and a while later, you could tell, and he made it clear that he didn't approve of her behaviors. But he did not say it straight out after the funeral, like her grandson did. Now, her own son did not show up for the funeral. Her own other son wore sandals and didn't want to show up for the funeral at all, so he wore his work clothes, painting clothes. As far as the memory of me sitting in a car with an adult right after the funeral, and that adult saying the same thing as my nephew, how could you be sad after all the things she did to you? That was a friend of the family who was very close to me that heard all about what her grandson said. My nephew, who was her grandson, used to talk to somebody like a therapist who was very close to the family, who used to help us work out these things, and sometimes even speak to our fathers or one of our relatives on our behalf. Like, he would work with the programs, work with my father, try to explain stuff to my father, get me a job, stuff like that, give me a ride to pick up my girlfriend, give my nephew a ride to his baseball game, give my nephew a ride to his friend in another town. Just a lot of good stuff. But he came up to me and said the same thing that my nephew said. How can you be so sad at your mother's funeral after all the stuff you said she did to you, after what Seth said she did to you, after all the way I watched her talk to you? I mean, I've spent enough time with you, Zach, to see her treating you bad. How could you be sad for her? Not only this was the opinion of his best friend, my brother. This is the opinion of his own son. Her own son wouldn't show up, so there was a lot of this opinion going around, but the only people that said it outright, I believe fully, right at the funeral was my nephew. Right after the funeral was Dan. My brother made it clear in other ways over time within a month's period. Her own son made it clear by not showing up. I was talking about this all during my childhood, and nobody gave a fuck how much she drugged me, abused me, beat me. Nobody cared. Nobody decided to call anybody or even allow me to keep my Social Security. They didn't even care if I could pay my rent. They didn't get me a job. They didn't help me drive. Nobody showed me how to drive. Nobody brought me to the doctor. Nobody pushed my father for a doctor. Nobody wanted to straighten out Social Security to make it correct. Instead, half the family wanted me off Social Security because they knew my mother was full of shit. The other half knew something was wrong, but they knew my mother was full of shit, so they didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, my father tries to clean up as much money as he can and be the money saver he is. Well, if we can save, we can buy Zach clothes twice a year. We can do a clothing shopping for school and do a clothing shopping for winter, and we can throw some clothing into his Christmas gifts. That can cost us about $300 a year, and then we'll keep $950 every month. So the subtraction to take that on that $300 a year is less than $50 a month. It's closer to $25 a month. So that's a good deal. Not only that, we don't have to bring him shopping as often. Meanwhile, while he's discussing how to save money on my clothing, my all these different things that are necessary, as the other kids in the program every month go clothing shopping and I'm wearing rags, oversized stuff, after the other kids every month go out and get clothing, come back with McDonald's, I went downstairs and had a can of Chef Boyardee every month, and I got punished to my room because I can't go clothing shopping. I'm not allowed to go clothing shopping. And when I ask why, they say, ask your father. So I asked my father. He says, I'll bring you at the end of the year. Meanwhile, by the time the year comes, I've already outgrown it, and the clothing we get is now not enough, and I have no wardrobe. I have maybe one or two pairs of clothing. I'm outgrowing all my clothing. We got to do a whole wardrobe. I'm a growing boy at the age of 14, 15. I'm not going clothing even enough. My shorts are short shorts. Half my clothing aren't even bought by my father. 80, 50, I'll say 60% of the clothing I wore that fit me was stuff I traded cigarettes for. A good 10% of that clothing was too big for me that I traded for. And the stuff my father gave me, almost all of it was too small, or something that people made fun of me for, or some type of jeans that were bought at Costco where the ass hangs out and they asked me if I wore my mother's jeans. Yeah, I'm not complaining. I was able to jimmy rig these, and people would say, oh, that's cool now. That's cool. But I would outgrow them and they would become short shorts. And what's even worse is I have a clothing check. I have a clothing check. It's just not being used for clothing every month. All the other kids' clothing checks are going to clothing every month. I am not going clothing shopping every month. I only get clothing on like Christmas or the school, start of school or something like that. Well, I'm still not complaining, but if I'm getting a clothing check just like the other orphans, and the other orphans are going out clothing shopping every month, it's probably a good idea to have me use my clothing check to go shopping with the other orphans, especially that they get providing transportation. We're stopping at multiple clothing stores. They have multiple in that mall, and you can get cheap prices there. You might think that the mall is expensive, but when you stop at multiple stores and you look for sales, I mean, 20, 30 bucks that I could have got a couple pairs, like one pair of pants and one shirt. I'll just pick up something 50% off at a store I really like. I mean, there's always something discounted when you have that many stores to choose from. But that wasn't an option. Plus, if you're going every month, then you're going and shopping. You don't see what you like one month. Well, the next month, maybe it's on sale. But see, that didn't occur to my father to let me go shopping with the other orphans with my clothing check, while the other kids go shopping with their clothing check. This wasn't a thought. Well, my father's thought was, these other orphans aren't getting $200 a month to go clothing. No. I don't want you to go out with other orphans. No. And then for the next 4 years, or many years, not 4, I think it was only like 3 years, I get to sit in a room every month by myself getting punished while they tell me to ask my father why. And the reason why is because there's only one staff, and they're not supposed to have any staff left in the program. They're all supposed to go to the mall. And because this staff member isn't exactly have the time to, watch me or anything, I stay in my room. He watches the door, and that's what they do to punish you. And then when it's supper time, I can go downstairs and get a Chef Boyardee, a can of green beans, or any can I want from the shelf, while the other kids go get the McDonald's that the program pays for. And they wouldn't even bring me back any. And they said, ask your father, ask your father, ask your father. Well, my father was keeping the money. That's what they really wanted me to ask. They didn't tell me that part. They just said, ask your father. They didn't tell me anything about I had a clothing check. I found that out at the age of 19 when it ended. Anyways, I can forgive all this if you would just admit that it's not a fantasy and stop hiding and running and handle some of this mess. Because with me not being able to drive, with me getting bloody on the side of the road when trying to walk someplace, with these health issues, I'm going to need my Social Security. And the only way I'm getting it is with a little bit of help, or at least with a little bit of honesty.